In June 2022, the last Howard Johnson's restaurant on Earth closed its doors in Lake George, New York. There were once more than 1,000 of them, their bright orange roofs marking the American highway from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Now, there were 0. This is the story of the company that basically invented the modern restaurant chain, the franchise model, the standardized menu, the roadside brand you could trust anywhere in the country, and then watched every single one of those ideas get taken by competitors who used them to win. A cigar salesman who bet everything on ice cream. Howard Deering Johnson was born in Boston in 1897 and raised in Quincy, Massachusetts. His father was a cigar manufacturer and wholesaler, and young Howard dropped out of school as a teenager to roll and sell cigars for the family business. He became, by all accounts, an exceptional salesman. But the cigar business was dying. The rise of cigarette smoking was destroying demand for cigars, and when Howard's father passed away, Johnson inherited a struggling company along with a significant amount of debt. In 1925, Johnson took over a small patent medicine store and soda fountain in Quincy. It was not much, but Johnson noticed something about the soda fountain that would change the trajectory of his entire life. The ice cream sold better than anything else in the store. So Johnson did something obsessive. He decided the problem with most ice cream was that it was cheap and thin, made with too little butterfat and too much filler. He reportedly bought an old recipe from a local pushcart vendor and reformulated it, doubling the butterfat content and using only natural ingredients. The result was a richer, creamier ice cream than almost anything else available. And then he did the thing that separated him from every other soda fountain owner in America. He turned it into a spectacle. He offered 28 flavors, an absurd, almost theatrical number for the era, when most places offered 3 or 4. 28 flavors was not just a product. It was a promise. It said, whatever you want, we have it. And it is better than what you get anywhere else. The ice cream made Johnson locally famous. Lines formed. He opened a beachfront stand that sold thousands of cones on hot summer days. He was, on a small scale, already doing the thing he would become legendary for, taking something ordinary and making it dependable, consistent, and better than the competition. But he wanted to expand, and he had almost no money to do it. So Johnson invented a solution that would reshape the entire American food industry. The man who invented the franchise. In 1935, Howard Johnson wanted to grow, but was hamstrung by a complete lack of funds. He could not afford to build and operate new restaurants himself. So he made a deal with an acquaintance who wanted to open a restaurant in Cape Cod. Johnson proposed something new. The other man would put up the money and run the restaurant, but he would use the Howard Johnson's name, sell Howard Johnson's food to Howard Johnson's exact standards, and buy his supplies through Howard Johnson. That arrangement is now called franchising. And while Howard Johnson did not invent the abstract concept entirely from nothing, he pioneered the modern restaurant franchise model at scale in a way nobody had done before. A decade before Ray Kroc ever saw a McDonald's, and long before franchising became the standard operating structure of the entire American service economy. The genius of it was that Johnson could expand using other people's money while maintaining control over the one thing that mattered: consistency. Every Howard Johnson's would serve the same food, at the same quality, under the same orange roof, no matter who actually owned and operated it. A family driving from Boston to Florida could stop at a Howard Johnson's in 6 different states and get the exact same meal every time. The results were staggering. Within 6 years of that first franchise deal, Howard Johnson's had grown to roughly 150 units across the United States. Most sprouted along the Atlantic coast, with a heavy concentration in Florida. By 1936, there were 41 locations. By 1939, over 100. And Johnson made them impossible to miss. He designed the buildings deliberately. On top of an appealing, historic-looking New England white building, he placed a bright orange roof, visible in daylight and lit by floodlights at night. Above that, a steeple reminiscent of a New England church. The whole thing looked, as one writer put it, like a creamsicle church. It was a brand you could recognize at highway speed from half a mile away, which was exactly the point. Nearly destroyed by the war, then explosive growth. Then World War II nearly killed the entire company. Gas rationing and the collapse of leisure road travel devastated a business built entirely around highway dining. Between the rationing and the disappearance of family road trips, Howard Johnson's cratered from roughly 200 restaurants down to just 12. 12. The company that had grown to 200 locations was almost wiped out entirely. Johnson survived through sheer adaptability. He pivoted the company's food production capacity toward supplying frozen meals to the military and to schools and other institutions. The commissary system he had built to guarantee consistency across his restaurants turned out to be perfectly suited for institutional food production. That pivot kept the company alive through the war years, when its actual restaurants were nearly all shuttered. When peace returned, business did not just recover, it exploded. The post-war era was the golden age of the American automobile and the American road trip. The interstate highway system was being built. Families had cars, disposable income, and a whole country to explore. And there, at seemingly every exit, was the orange roof, familiar, dependable, clean, and offering 28 flavors of ice cream and a full menu of reliable American food. Howard Johnson's rode that wave to the absolute top. Through the 1950s and 1960s, it became the largest restaurant chain in the United States. The first true giant in the industry, bigger than anyone had ever been. At its peak in the 1960s and 1970s, the company operated roughly 1,000 restaurants, stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Its orange roofs and steeples covered much of the U.S. highway system. The company was so dominant that in the 1960s and 70s, Howard Johnson's reportedly served more meals in America than any entity except the United States military. It also became a leader in roadside lodging, building a chain of motor lodges alongside the restaurants, putting families up for the night and feeding them in the same trusted brand. Howard Johnson's was not just a restaurant chain. It was a fundamental part of the American travel experience. For an entire generation, the orange roof meant you had found a safe, familiar place to stop. The competitors who used HoJo's own playbook. At the very peak, the threat was already forming, and it was built on Howard Johnson's own innovation. The franchise model that Johnson had pioneered was now being used by a new generation of competitors who had studied what he built and figured out how to do it faster, cheaper, and more aggressively. McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Wendy's, Long John Silver's, Burger King, the fast food revolution. These chains took Johnson's core insight, consistency, and recognizability across every location, and paired it with something Howard Johnson's was not built for: speed and low price. Howard Johnson's was a sit-down restaurant. You came in, you sat at a table, a waitress took your order, and you had a full meal. That model had been perfect for the leisurely family road trips of the 1950s. But American eating habits were changing fast. People wanted food quickly and cheaply. They wanted to pull off the highway, get a burger and fries in 5 minutes for a fraction of the price of a sit-down meal, and get back on the road. Fast food was faster than Howard Johnson's, cheaper than Howard Johnson's, and used the exact franchising and standardization playbook that Howard Johnson's had written. Johnson had built the blueprint, and now a swarm of competitors was using it to attack him from below on both price and speed. Howard Johnson's did not have a good answer. The sit-down format that had made it great was now a structural disadvantage, and the brand that had once meant the best ice cream and the most reliable meal on the highway started to feel, to a new generation, like their parents' restaurant. The brand that stopped changing The deeper problem was that Howard Johnson stopped evolving. For decades, the company's greatest strength had been its consistency. The fact that a Howard Johnson's in 1955 was exactly like a Howard Johnson's in 1965. But consistency has a dark side. The same rigid sameness that built trust also meant the brand never modernized. The menu stayed largely the same. The restaurant design stayed the same. The orange roof that had been iconic in 1955 started to look dated by 1975. While McDonald's was constantly innovating, new products, new marketing, new formats, aggressive expansion, Howard Johnson's stood still. The 28 flavors that had once been a marvel became a nostalgic relic rather than a competitive advantage. The food, once considered dependable and good, came to be seen as bland and old-fashioned as American palates and expectations shifted. There is a genuine lesson buried in this. The consistency that makes a brand beloved in one era can become the exact thing that kills it in the next, because the qualities that build loyalty and the qualities that drive reinvention are almost opposites. Howard Johnson's had optimized so completely for never changing that when change became necessary for survival, the company had no institutional muscle for it. It had spent 40 years teaching itself and its franchisees that the whole point was to keep everything exactly the same. The 1970s made all of this worse. A severe recession swept across the American economy. Fuel crises made the long family road trips that Howard Johnson's depended on far less frequent and far more expensive. The chain's entire business model, feeding travelers on the highway, was under assault from every direction at once. The dark incidents nobody wanted associated with the name. The 1970s also brought a series of genuinely dark incidents at Howard Johnson's properties that damaged the brand's carefully built image of family-friendly safety. In July 1971, a fire was deliberately set on the 12th floor of a Howard Johnson's motor lodge in New Orleans. 6 people were killed by smoke and toxic gases, including 4 members of a visiting family and a security guard who died trying to rescue guests. In January 1973, at a Howard Johnson's hotel in New Orleans, a sniper used the building's roof as a perch, killing 9 people and injuring 12 others in one of the most notorious, violent incidents of the era. And in November 1974, the singer and actress Connie Francis was attacked at a Howard Johnson's lodge in Jericho, New York. She sued the motel chain over its security failures and won a $2.5 million judgment. At the time, one of the largest such judgments ever awarded, and a case that reshaped the legal landscape around hotel liability for guest safety. None of these tragedies were the company's core problem, but they chipped away at the one thing the brand had always sold above everything else: the promise that the orange roof meant safety, familiarity, and comfort. A brand built entirely on being a trusted, dependable stop for American families could not afford to be associated with headlines like these. The founder's son sold it all. Howard Deering Johnson had handed control of the company to his son, Howard Brennan Johnson, known as Bud, in the late 1950s. Bud Johnson ran the company through its peak and into its decline. And in 1979, a relatively short time after the company had been at the absolute top of the American restaurant industry, Bud Johnson decided he was done. He sold Howard Johnson's to Britain's Imperial Group, the conglomerate formerly known as the Imperial Tobacco Company, for $630 million. The decision to sell revealed how much confidence the founding family had lost in the company's future. Howard Johnson's was still enormous. It still had 1,000 locations. But the man whose family name was on every orange roof in America looked at where the business was headed and chose to cash out rather than fight to turn it around. Under Imperial's ownership, the decline accelerated. Imperial was a tobacco conglomerate with no real expertise in running American restaurants. Its efforts to update the restaurants and motels went nowhere. The brand kept aging, the competition kept winning, and the new owners, thousands of miles away in Britain, had neither the understanding nor the commitment to execute the fundamental reinvention the company desperately needed. Just 6 years later, in 1985, Imperial gave up entirely. It sold Howard Johnson's to the rival restaurant and hotel empire Marriott for $314 million, roughly half of what Imperial had paid for it 6 years earlier. A $316 million loss in 6 years, evaporated on a brand that could not be fixed by owners who did not understand it. The dismantling. Marriott's acquisition was the beginning of the actual dismantling of Howard Johnson's, and it happened for a brutally logical reason. Marriott, renowned throughout the industry for the quality of its management, had no interest in keeping the Howard Johnson's restaurant name alive. It had bought the company for its assets and its real estate, not its fading brand. Marriott split the company apart. The lodging operation, the Howard Johnson's hotels and motor lodges, was sold off to Prime Motor Inns, permanently severing the hotels from the restaurants. That separation is why, today, Howard Johnson still exists as a hotel brand owned by Wyndham, while the restaurants vanished completely. The two halves of the empire were cut apart and sent in opposite directions. The Howard Johnson's restaurants that Marriott had acquired were either closed outright or converted into Marriott's own Big Boy and Hot Shops brands. The orange roofs came down. The buildings that had served the same 28 flavors and the same reliable menu for decades became something else, or became nothing at all. The number of operating Howard Johnson's restaurants collapsed through the following decades. By 1995, only a fraction remained. By the early 2000s, they were largely gone. In 2005, there were a scattered handful. One of the last, in Lake Placid, New York, closed in 2015. And finally, in June 2022, the very last Howard Johnson's restaurant on Earth, in Lake George, New York, closed permanently. The chain that had once served more meals than anyone in America except the military ended with a single restaurant switching off its lights for good. What the orange roof actually meant. It is easy to explain the Howard Johnson's collapse as a simple failure to adapt. Fast food was faster and cheaper. The brand got stale. The founding family cashed out, and a series of owners who did not understand it finished the job. All of that is accurate. But the deeper story is more ironic than that, and more instructive. Howard Johnson built the modern American chain restaurant. The franchise model that let a business expand on other people's capital while maintaining central control. He pioneered it at scale. The standardized menu that meant a customer could trust the food anywhere in the country. That was his idea. The recognizable, deliberately designed building that you could spot from the highway and know exactly what you were getting. The orange roof was one of the first great examples of it. Every one of these ideas is now completely standard across the entire global restaurant industry. Howard Johnson's did not fail because its ideas were wrong. It failed because its ideas were so right that everyone else adopted them, and then executed them faster, cheaper, and with the willingness to keep changing that Howard Johnson's had trained itself out of. The company gave the entire industry its playbook, and then got beaten with it. For millions of Americans, the orange roof was not a business case study. It was the marker of a family road trip. It was 28 flavors of ice cream after a long day in the car. It was the dependable, familiar stop on the highway, where you knew exactly what you were going to get, whether you were in Massachusetts, or Florida, or California. It was, for a few decades in the middle of the 20th century, one of the most recognizable and trusted brands in the entire country. And now, there are none. The man who taught America how to build a restaurant chain built the biggest one of all. And watched the students he never knew he had take everything he invented and use it to erase him. Subscribe if stories like this one matter to you. because there are more of them. Pioneers who built the blueprint everyone still uses, and disappeared while their own ideas conquered the world.